please be upstanding for the chairman.
Please be seated. Oh, I've got a dodgy seat. Yeah. Can I welcome everyone to the meeting this evening, and can I make a special welcome to the newly elected young mayor and 2 members of her cabinet who are here to observe tonight. Right? Can we have well, at the moment I've got apologies from Councillor Brooks, Bolger, Craven and Mason. Have we got any other apologies?
Yes, Councillor McIntyre, Chair.
Councillor McIntyre, thank you very much. Anyone else? No? Then can you all please sign the record of attendance? That's around somewhere. I'd like to say you didn't get paid, but you do. Declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest? No? Well, if you find you have some as the meeting goes on, just fill the form in, please. Minutes of the last meeting of the council. Can we approve the minutes of the last meeting of the council? Thank you. And can we move on to the item 4, the motion on the agenda? And over to you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to propose this motion on economic and social rights. They are absolutely fundamental of a good standard of living. The 2010 Equality Act was the last piece of legislation passed by a Labour government. The Act set a fundamental change in terms of equality, making a real difference to ordinary people's lives. However, when the coalition got into power, the socio-economic duty in the Act was never commenced. This would have required public bodies to adopt effective and transparent policies to reduce inequalities as a result from socio-economic disadvantage. Some bodies already do this, and North Tyneside Council has a strong track record of economic and social rights. And recently, it was announced that we are one of 2 councils in the country to not only kept up our levels of spending on emergency welfare, but we've actually increased them. 2 councils in the country have kept up their levels. We are one of 2, which is fantastic to see in North Tyneside. We make a real difference to our residents' lives that are in emergency need. This is under a Labour mayor and a Labour group in control of the council. We are absolutely committed to ensuring this goes forward. Unfortunately, though, this is not the case in all public authorities, and certainly not from the government in the last 9 years. We have seen some of the most unequal, regressive, draconian economic and social policies ever. 14 million people, a fifth of the population, live in poverty. 4 million of them are about 50% below the poverty line, and 1.5 million are destitute, unable to afford basic essentials. This is not just out-of-work poverty. A lot of this is in-work poverty, hard-working people that, because for various reasons, cannot afford a good standard of living. The UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Philip Alston, visited the UK in November, including the North East. He spent a lot of his time in the food bank in the West End, and he also did visits with individuals in Newcastle. At the end of his mission, he concluded the costs of austerity have fallen disproportionately upon the poor, women, racial, ethnic minorities, children and single parents, and people with disabilities. The people of all the protected characteristics have been most unfairly hit by this government. The changes to tax and benefits since 2010 have been highly regressive, and the policies have taken the highest toll on those least able to bear it. The experience of the United Kingdom, especially since 2010, underscores the conclusion that poverty is a political choice. The United Kingdom should not be having a rapporteur from the UN on extreme poverty. In this country, that should not be a thing. Unfortunately, under this regressive government, it has been. I urge Council to support the motion, which closes to write to the Prime Minister, asking her to commence a socio-economic duty in the 2010 Equality Act, Right to the Chancellor urged him to reverse the most regressive tax measures and benefit welfare matters that he's brought in. And also to support local campaigns. I know there's increasingly going to be more local campaigns on this, so hopefully as a council we can get behind that under Mayor. Thank you. Hope you support the motion.
Thank you. Am I right in thinking that Councillor Newman's seconding this?
Yes, Chair. I'm honoured to second this motion because for me this is probably one of the most important motions this council has considered in recent years. In the past we have brought to this council very specific motions calling for our budget cuts to end. All of these have failed as the government has ignored it. And this motion goes beyond just this council. It goes to the entire society and all forms of austerity. Now, during this debate, I'm sure everybody in this chamber will voice their own views on the government's austerity programme, but I just want to ask us all to consider for a second exactly how we talk about austerity. Now, most people traditionally look at figures to support their views, and so if we look at the figures, we could talk about how this council's budget has been reduced by 120 million in recent years. We could go further and talk about how this council, talk about how all local authorities face in 2019 a combined cuts of around £1.3 billion. We could talk about the alarming increase in those relying on food banks. The Trussell Fund has alone said that since 2013 it's almost doubled the amount of emergency food parcels that it's given out. And it's also been reported in Tyne and Wear in 2017 to 2018 there was at least 27,000 parcels given out by the Trust. We could talk about 14 million people, including 4.5 million children that are living below the breadline, and all how an analysis from the housing charity Shelter has revealed that there are over 320,000 people homeless in Britain, a rise of 13,000. We could talk about underinvestment in the NHS and its effect on its services, or we could talk about the police service and how it's lost over 21,000 police officers since 2010. We could talk about how nationally we've lost 11,000 firefighters. We could talk about how nationally our armed forces have suffered massive cuts, the army alone losing 21,000. We could talk about all these figures, but I don't think we should. Because if we look at austerity like an accountant as simply figures on a piece of paper, it restricts our ability to truly understand what's happening. We should talk about how our residents see their services cut year on year despite pleas to central government to provide proper funding. We should talk about the mother who's just lost her job, finding herself trapped in a cycle of debt, not of her own making, but one of universal credit. As we all know, universal credit is designed in such a way that people are automatically in a cycle of debt. We should talk about the family who, down on their luck, are forced to beg for food at a food bank. The indignity of welfare reforms is shocking. And where does this lead? We should talk about the link between austerity, welfare reform, mental health and suicide. We should talk about the people who have died shortly after being found fit for work. We should talk about the number of people sofa surfing, sleeping rough, living without the security of a home, not knowing if they will sleep under a roof or a star, sleeping with the constant threat of violence. We should talk about how people can no longer get treatment that was once provided by the NHS, the stress this causes as people fight for treatment that they need from an NHS funded by a government. We should talk about residents who haven't been the victim of low-level crime simply are given reference numbers by the police because they don't have the numbers to investigate. Or the revelation in a recent Channel 4 documentary that there are now private security firms taking on the roles traditionally performed by police. We should talk about the people who, in a number of legal cases, now can no longer gain access to legal aid, resulting in justice for those who can afford it only. We should talk about the firefighter, the police officer, the doctor, the nurse, the ambulance crew and the many other public services who are tired, overworked and trying to protect and serve the public while dealing with a government that refuses to provide adequate funding. We should talk about our servicemen and women who, after serving their nation loyally and bravely, find themselves made redundant, many days away from pension entitlements in an obvious attempt to save money. Chair, we simply cannot look at austerity in numbers because it hides the human element of austerity. Behind the figures are men, women and children who love, who laugh and despair. The government has for too long looked at figures on a piece of paper and numbers in a chart and left morality out of the equation. For those in this chamber tonight, I will ask you to think very carefully about how you vote, because in my opinion, opposing this motion basically means you're in favour of all the situations I've described. I will simply finish by saying what is happening in this country is morally wrong. The system only works when it works for everyone. Every person matters, and the people expect that those they have elected will be the ones who will defend them, which is why I hope everybody in this chamber will vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Now throw the floor open to comments and bring in Councillor Margaret Hall.
Once again, we are talking about the devastating effects a Conservative government has had on those who are least able to cope with austerity. We have residents who depend on food banks to survive. They have low wages and social security payments that do not allow them to live with dignity. We care that more than 20% of children in North Tyneside are estimated to be living in poverty. The Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health identify that poverty is making children sick. Aware of this, we have made a difference to the lives of babies born in North Tyneside each year. With our 0 to 19 children's public health policies, we have integrated services working across school nurses, health visitors, the early years and children's services. The Care Quality Commission report last year was full of praise for North Tyneside's public health provision. Because we care about people and their health, we have worked hard to help 1,500 smokers to give up smoking, which damages health and causes huge costs to the NHS. We are working with local pharmacies and the NHS to tackle the further 30,000 adults who continue to smoke. Because we care, we fund 4,000 health checks in GP surgeries. Heart problems, diabetes, and other conditions are spotted early with these checks, saving lives, and thousands of treatments are avoided in the NHS. We know our community is hurting, we care, and we show it by providing opportunities for families to access our excellent active North Tyneside scheme. In total, there have just been over 44,500 attendances for our universal and targeted physical activities. Over 6,000 individuals, from toddlers to adults, have benefited from this service, good for both physical and mental health. It has got progressively harder for us to intervene with our protective measures because of this government's austerity policies and refusal to acknowledge the need. We want to enable all our community to have chances in education, live in adequate housing, have enough good quality food and a decent standard of living. Health and well-being is a right for everyone. Because we care, we will continue campaigning against and challenging the cuts in funding from this government. It is our duty to tell this government of our concerns and for them to consider the effects their measures are having on those least able to protest. Chair, I support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor O'Shea.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to perhaps just explain to the Council what is happening locally in North Tyneside, and I'll refer to some initiatives which the Council is promoting around discretionary housing payments, which help people on low incomes who just can't manage to pay the rent between the benefits they get and the rent they have. The local council tax support scheme is the one which gives assistance to low earners who are struggling with their council tax. And finally, we have the local welfare provision, which captures all of the issues needed by local people around housing needs, foodstuffs, and clothing and furniture. And I think that's been very successful. But I want to highlight in particular the fantastic work of the Whitley Bay Food Bank. And I'm given some statistics here which are quite frightening. In the last 7 years, they've given out over 23,000 food parcels to local residents. And they currently have on the books almost 7,500 of our local residents, including 127 babies, 226 children, and just over almost 5,000 adults. And this year, they've given out, since the 1st of April last year, just under 5,000 food parcels. I find this shameful that in this country, which I think has got the 5th or 6th most wealthiest countries on the planet, should have people who are in such distress that they have to appeal and go to food banks. I think it's shameful, and I ask the Council to support this resolution which tries to resolve that issue. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Waggett-Fairley.
Thank you, Chair. The Equality and Human Rights Commission report published in March 2018 states, the reforms of the social security system since 2010 may present the most significant threat to the implementation of socio-economic rights in Great Britain. In many cases, the levels of social security entitlements are not sufficient to cover the basic cost of living. Since then, with the government's attention being focused on Brexit matters, it has failed to address the growing inequality in our society and the devastation that their unfair and increasingly regressive welfare measures are having on our local communities. The statistics are indeed shocking, and Councillor Newman has outlined them very well. But even in my ward, Killingworth, one of the least deprived in the borough, officers have estimated that approximately 19.3% of children are living in poverty. I find that a truly shocking statistic. Over the last 9 years, central government have expected this authority to implement many pieces of legislation that have had long-lasting and often detrimental effect on our residents. But strangely enough, this government has shied away from activating or commencing its socio-economic duty of the Equality Act, and that begs the question, why? Could it be that the then Home Secretary, Mrs May, said in November 2017 that the Labour legislation was ridiculous and that she was scrapping Harriet Harman's law for good? Since when was legislation that attempts to tackle deprivation and inequality ridiculous? Could it be because it would demonstrate just how bad the discrimination and inequality had become under this Tory government, and how it was continuing to worsen, especially in light that the continued rollout of the hated universal credit and the increasingly onerous PIP and ESA assessments that our residents are having to endure? The activating of the Equality Act, or parts thereof, is not a pick and mix. The UK government has an obligation to make socio-economic rights a reality for everyone. This government has signed up to international treaties, and they are not honouring their legal obligations. Put simply, under Article 2 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, they have failed to demonstrate to the international community and governing body of the ICESCR how their continuing and austerity measures, tax policies and legal reforms implemented since 2010 continue, and I will quote, be necessary, proportionate and are not discriminatory, and can be classed as temporary when they have been in place for 9 years. Clearly, this government have been unable to comply, and that is the reason why they have failed to commence this part of Section 1 of the Equality Act 2010. It is apparent to even the most casual observer that the most vulnerable and disadvantaged in our society continue to bear the brunt of the welfare changes, such as the benefit freeze, change to pension entitlements, the bedroom tax, and all the other taxes and spending decisions that have been imposed since 2010. As local councillors, we witness the effects every day from these cuts that they are having in our local communities, in and around North Tyneside, from seeing homeless people sleeping in shop doorways, to the desperate residents coming to your councillor's surgery because they've been sanctioned yet again and haven't eaten for 3 days, From the
You have a
carer
minute
at
left.
Woods End who has had their support package cut, to the man with a disability who's had his ESA taken off him. These are real people with real lives, and they live in our neighbourhoods. They deserve a voice. This authority needs to make decisions based on socio-economic need, where it can target its resources where it's most needed, how it can narrow the gaps in lived experience, and strategically plan ahead on evidence-based policy making to provide an appropriate level of infrastructure for all our residents. I welcome and fully support this motion and would expect every elected member in this room to do likewise.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, none of us want to see people in poverty, and this Conservative government and the coalition government before it has done a great deal to help people at the lower end of the financial scale because it cares for the individuals and the families affected. Tackling poverty and delivering social reform has been a priority, and the government spends £180 billion a year on welfare to help those who need it. Making sure that work pays is a key principle of those reforms, because work is the best way out of poverty, and the government has been encouraging people into work, and very successfully also. Unemployment was extremely high at the end of the last Labour government in 2010, with all its attendant miseries, and unemployment has fallen significantly since then. Over 3.6 million people have been helped into work, and employment is now at a record high. This is nothing short of a jobs miracle, Chairman. The number of people unemployed is at its lowest since 1975. Work provides economic independence, it helps families to care for themselves, as well as the psychological benefits of self-worth, of the sense of purpose that employment brings. In the North East too, unemployment has fallen dramatically. The number of children growing up in households where no one works is much lower, and this is a really important issue. This is a definite improvement. The number of children in houses where no one had ever worked almost doubled under the last Labour government, which is an appalling situation. So did the number of children in workless households, a real tragedy. Now the number of children in long-term workless households has fallen significantly, and the total number of workless households is at the lowest level on record, which is really important. More people are working full-time as well, up over 400,000 over the year, and part-time work has also increased. The number of vacancies also is very high, providing people with more choices. The quality of jobs is rising too. Almost 3/4 are full-time, and of those in part-time, surveys indicate that barely 10% want full-time employment. We're also seeing wages rising at a higher rate now and outstripping inflation. Education has been an important element, and pupil premium has provided hundreds of thousands of pounds for schools where children are from disadvantaged backgrounds. The pupil premium figures are often not included in the school funding levels which are reported, but they are really very important. And the Technology College, which is going to be available under the North of Tyne devolution, will bring further opportunities for our children. Another aspect which hasn't been touched on is the level of taxation, Chairman. The personal allowance has raised significantly under the coalition and Conservative governments, enabling people to earn a lot more before they actually have to pay tax, and that is a particular benefit for people at the lower end of the income scale. Remember, Chairman, at the end of the last Labour government, the personal allowance was £6,475 a year. That meant that when people earned £124 a week, they had to start paying tax. That figure, the allowance has raised significantly year on year, and now it stands at £240 per week before people have to start paying tax, before they pay any tax at all. That helps the people at the lowest end of the pay scale, particularly legislation which helps those poorer people, and yet it has been opposed every time by Labour MPs. They would choose to ensure that those at the lower end of the pay scale have to start paying tax at a lower level. That cannot be fair. No one can claim to be treating the poor fairly if they would oppose such matters. And locally, of course, we saw Labour oppose the chance to have a lower council tax rate.
You have a minute left.
Thank you, Chairman. For the reasons I've detailed, Chairman, I don't feel that this motion gives a true and realistic picture of the situation, and for that reason I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Chair. It would have been helpful if the movers of the motion had included information as to where the figures quoted have been evidenced, although I think I remember former Labour MP Chuka Umunna speaking about similar figures recently, so I'm guessing that's where they've come from. There is no single universally accepted definition of poverty. For example, 2 children sharing a bedroom is cited as one measure of poverty, as is not having a brand new winter coat every year. There are actually many dimensions to poverty, and it's an ongoing problem which all societies have faced and are facing. For example, older people who own their own homes would be considered rich by some in this chamber, given some of the comments in the budget debate, when many of them may actually be asset rich but income poor and struggling on a daily basis. In addition, an emphasis on income, as in this motion, runs the risk of other factors that influence poverty being neglected. Debt, family breakup, and drug and alcohol dependency can all be causative factors. Mental health issues too, which is why the government's increased funding and support for mental health services should be welcomed by all. Although we obviously cannot be complacent on this issue, it's good to note that poverty levels have in fact fallen substantially in the last 50 years to the lowest recorded level. Figures from earlier this month show that poverty rates have continued to fall in the last 10 years and will have fallen even more if housing costs aren't taken into account. This is not an exact science. In the Family Resources Survey, there was evidence of an underreporting of benefit income. The benefit income reported by participants only accounted for 82% of the money that we know the government actually spent on benefits, leaving a discrepancy of £37 billion. Adjusting these figures to the correct level would have lowered the poverty rate from 22% to 18%. This is a complex issue and a problem that all governments have struggled with for a long time, including the last Labour government, where, of course, we know the first food banks were created. But we are committed to reducing poverty levels by encouraging more people into work, supporting those with mental health issues and their families, and building a strong economy which will benefit everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Samuel?
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to the last 2 contributions there, and I'm still waiting to hear anybody on that side actually addressing the terms of this motion. It's all very well to quote reams and reams of statistics about how there are more people in work and all that sort of thing. You forget about the experience of day-to-day that we see around us. I don't remember, even 10 years ago, that every supermarket had collections for a food bank, that so many people actually, and it's not just unemployed, but people actually in work had to go to food banks. Nurses, for instance, had to go to food banks simply to feed themselves, which is an absolutely shocking state of affairs, and that has developed since 2010. And again, as I've said in previous debates, austerity was something you were very proud of because you felt you had to cut down the size of government, cut down the spending and reduce the size of the deficit, and therefore there had to be casualties along the way. And that was the rhetoric we had very plainly a few years. Why don't you just take ownership of that policy and just admit that that's the outcome of this? Since 2010, we've seen year-on-year reductions in the amount of money available to local government, and that's had a significant impact. For instance, the youth service, which we used to have, which actually dealt with issues with young people misbehaving, antisocial behaviour, etc., and other things like that, disappeared completely. Other services have gone because of the cutbacks that you supported, and it ends up with the police having to pick up a lot of the slack, and that, and in turn, the police, the support to the police has been lost in the last 2 years as well. So as a result, you can see the evidence all around you in terms of the conditions that people are living in, the increases in poverty, and you don't talk about these things. There's no point in quoting range of statistics when actually the evidence is before our eyes as to what your austerity has done to people. I fully support this motion.
Councillor Leslie Spillard?
Thank you, Chair. Making work pay. The problem is for too many people it doesn't pay at all. You're classed as employed for working as little as 1 hour a week. So the statistics on employment can mean nothing if people actually don't have enough to live on. As councillors, unless we live in a very small bubble, each and every one of us will have come across the consequences, whether it's a person who comes and is crying because they haven't got enough to feed their child that week, or they're going without food themselves and are exhausted and ill, whether it's people who can't afford to go to the dentist, because of course that's not free to anyone nowadays, or very few people. My son actually had to do that recently, £380 way outside the pocket of so many people for dental treatment. What we see now is head teachers publicly speaking out about the impact of poverty on their students. Teachers are putting their hands in their own pockets to feed children or to provide the things they need. I know there are councillors in this room who have done the same for residents because they can't bear to see the state they're in. We need to change. We need to be a country that rejects austerity and thinks about the well-being of all the people. We've seen a big shift in the wealth of this country, and it's all upwards and away from the bottom. Our people need to be valued and they need to be supported, and at this time with this government that is not happening. I can't understand that anyone would choose to reject this motion if they cared about the people of North Tyneside. Thank you.
I have another 5 speakers and I'm not taking any more after that. Councillor Hodson.
Thank you, Chairman. I do think the recovery from the financial crisis of 2008 has been difficult for all of us. Councillor Newman said he didn't want to get involved in numbers, but I do think he's introduced quite a lot of numbers at the beginning of his motion, and I want to comment on those. In North Tyneside, do the presenters really allege that 40,000 residents of North Tyneside are living in poverty? Because that's what the numbers seem to imply. That seems an awful lot to me. Do the presenters really allege that 11,428 residents are living 50% below the poverty line? And do the presenters really allege that 4,285 residents are destitute, unable to afford basic essentials, accommodation, clothing and food? I think those need answering. If they do, could they explain how North Tyneside's social services are coping with this massive hardship? Councillor Hall explained that she was coping pretty well with what she was faced with. Chairman, I do not doubt that some people need more, but I challenge the words poverty and destitution, and I think that a number of things here. Tax reduction for lower incomes is very helpful, has been carried out by the government. The NHS provision of health care for all, brilliant. The triple lock for state pensioners has been very well received. The raising of the minimum wage has been well received. The massive increase in jobs, 3 million since 2008, have all been directed to improve the lives of the population as a whole, not undermine it. Chairman, I look for cogent answers to my questions before I could support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I fully support the motion, and I can't believe why anybody wouldn't support this motion. I find it absolutely incredible and unbelievable, and I really wish Councillor Wallace and maybe Theresa May would come and speak to some people in the ward I represent in Long Benton, and I know the same is true across the whole borough actually. If you're in touch with people at the grassroots level in this borough, you would know that there's a massive increase in the number of people experiencing hardship as a result of your government's austerity measures. It's actually creating mental health problems in people. It's not the other way round, that mental health problems, drug and alcohol addiction or abuse are leading people into poverty. Poverty is a key factor in increasing the number of people experiencing mental health problems. And people are proud in this borough. My experience of working with people at the grassroots level is they're very proud, they want to work, they're committed towards achieving the very best for their families, but they need real jobs with real living wage, not the kind of money that they can get paid. You're not comparing like with like when you say more people are in work. It's not the same situation. The jobs are not the same. Working for an hour a week on a 0-hour contract isn't the same as having full-time employment on a real living wage. So I invite you to come and speak to some real people and see how you feel. Thank you.
Elected Mayor.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm listening to what's been said from the Conservative side of this chamber, and I think it's very, very sad. This motion is about the people we serve. It's about the people who depend on us as councillors to look after them and their families. And I can't believe that I have to be taken back to the last time Labour was in government, or how wonderful this government is now. I don't care. My concern is about the people we serve in North Tyneside. And if you got out and about actually in the borough, like I do quite regularly, and into the areas of deprivation, you would understand there's a great need out there. We need some more support to help these people who are suffering. I've just had a councillor in my office this afternoon tell me about some of the people in her ward who are going through very, very difficult times, to be quite honest. And to think that I have to be told how wonderful this government is, and we can't even consider our own people and how we can help them, and how sad it is for them, I feel very upset, to be quite honest. That is our main concern when we're councillors in North Tyneside. So, I hope this council can accept this motion put forward by councillors Johnson, Newman and Samuel. Although we have worked hard here in North Tyneside to tackle deprivation, there is still much, much more to do. I can tell you, and I think you would all agree, austerity has not ended. And on behalf of the council, my cabinet and my councillors, I'm very happy to support this motion. And I do hope that the rest of the council can join me so that we can address the many, many problems that some of our residents have to deal with every day. Every resident, I don't care who they are, should be able to receive quality education, have access to decent housing, healthcare, good food, and a decent standard of living. And I have to tell you, if you know quite a lot about this borough, you would realise that many of them don't have that, what they are entitled to. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support this motion. Just to say that we were told austerity was over, but then Philip Hammond in his spring statement has evidently said it isn't over. And it isn't over for the poorest in our society. For the fourth year, they've frozen benefits. And the thing is, with you freeze benefits and cut income tax, what you actually do is you make poor families poorer and rich families richer. The poorest fifth of the households are expected to be £1,400 worse off, when in contrast the richest fifth are going to be an average of £300 better off. I think just because you don't see poverty doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does exist, and I think a lot of the councillors here in this chamber can tell you and give you stories about how it does exist. And as to say that people have got jobs and we've got full employment, benefit in work poverty is actually increasing, because a lot of people who are in work have got such poorly paid jobs, they're actually having to claim benefits. So that doesn't make it any better. You're actually caught in a trap. We've got things like the gig economy, as like Councillor Spillard referred to. We've got 0-hour contracts. You could have 1 hour a week and not be able to claim benefits, and then you're sanctioned for another 8 weeks, it can be. You know, we've got to remember why we have austerity. 2008 was the massive financial crash, and what we did was bail out the banks. And what's happening is the poor in society are having to pay for those mistakes, and it's now the 11th year we're having to pay for them. And the figures are right, because we was actually presented with a paper, the Children and Young People's Committee was, and we've actually got 7,700 children in this borough living in poverty. We are higher in comparison to the other boroughs around the area, but we still have 7,700 children in poverty, and I think that's a disgrace. And I think you should be supporting this motion, because we need to stop this now. Thank you.
Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Chair. I obviously will be supporting this motion, but I just want to pick up on some comments on the other side. Councillor Hodson said that the recovery from the economic crash had been difficult for all. I think that's not quite true. The Office of National Statistics itself has confirmed that the richest 1,000 people in the UK increased their wealth by 724 billion from 2010 to date. I don't think they've had a particularly difficult recovery from the economic crash. From the point of view of the figures trotted out on full employment and the economic miracle the government has created, again, the Office of National Statistics actually confirms that over 3 million people in the UK are now classed as underemployed. There's a legal definition for that, which is based around actually wanting more hours or trying to take more jobs. So that's over 10% of the workforce is now actually classed as underemployed. They want to work more, they want to earn more money, and they cannot. And the benefits that supported people in that situation have been cut. And no matter what you say about this supposed economic jobs miracle that was created, at some point in time you have to look at what is effectively cause and effect. So all these different changes that have been made to benefits, and I fully agree that it should be around work being made to pay and people getting back into employment. But the simple fact is the concept of a food bank didn't really exist in 2009-2010. Trussell Trust are the biggest provider of food banks in the UK. They handed out 41,000 food bank parcels in 2010. They handed out 1.2 million last year, and they are only part of the support network, the informal support network that has been built up. Those figures are absolutely undeniable. You can't magic them away. There is a need. People do not want to go to food banks unless they have to. It is literally, of course, it's the last resort. So I'm supporting this motion. I'm genuinely amazed that the people opposite will sit, they will trot out the figures, but they will never look at what the effect has been on society and social cohesion. I think you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Can I now invite the mover of the motion to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Quite frankly, can't believe some of the comments from the other side of the chamber. Councillor Wallace said none of us want to see people in poverty. The track record of the government over the last 9 years, both coalition and Conservative, and the track record of the councillors in this chamber voting time and time again to not go to the government to ask for more money, to ask for austerity end, proves that some people might well be okay because people live in poverty. Councillor Wallace said that people should work their way out of poverty. 3 million children in working families are in poverty despite living in a working family. Record unemployment, Councillor Wallace said, as Councillor Davis has already referred to, low wages, 0-hour contracts, gig economy does not translate to working your way out of poverty. The quality of jobs is rising, according to Councillor Wallace. We've seen again, those jobs are not quality jobs that are being created. Councillor Austin asked where the figures are from in the motion. The first line is from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, one of the most hugely respected think tanks in this country. The second lot is from the United Nations. The third lot is from government statistics. Every statistic in that motion is from a respected organisation. Councillor Wallace also said that, Councillor Austin also said that people are asset rich but income poor. Completely at odds with the picture Councillor Wallace had just presented a couple of speakers earlier. And Councillor Austin said that food banks created in the last Labour government. Councillor Rankin's already said the numbers, 41,000 to 1.2 million. That's just the Trussell Trust. The Trussell Trust are only provide 68% of food banks in this country now. So there's 32% of people out there using other food banks. That statistic will make that more than likely above 2 million people regularly using food banks. She trusts the record of the last Labour government, but of course during this time we were dealing with a global financial crisis, yet still only 41,000 people were using food banks. Because just like here in North Tyneside, the last Labour government cared about people. Here in North Tyneside we care about people. We've heard from Councillor Davis, our record is much better than some authorities in our area with poverty because we've invested. The Good Home Standard, which is one of the big issues, so a lot of people live in poverty, living in poor quality home, private rented. Our council stock in North Tyneside is fantastic and it's a great investment in from this Labour Council over the last 9 years. The minimum wage increase that Councillor Hodson mentioned, the minimum wage increase was not fast enough, it's not gone far enough yet, and there's not a real living wage. In the last election, the Labour government committed to implement a real living wage, which will actually see people out of poverty, not the phony living wage that this government company had. Councillor Wallace also mentioned the personal allowance, and that for working people, that brings people further out of poverty. It's also one of the most highly regressive tax measures. Councillor Wallace surely knows that people that earn the most benefit the most from the personal allowance rising. And I've echoed the words of the Mayor. We have much more to do in North Tyneside. We have a lot to be proud of, but the only way that we can fix this is get a Labour government, a Labour Mayor in North Tyneside, a Labour Mayor in the north of Tyne, and Labour councillors elected, as clearly the Conservatives opposite are not willing to listen. So I urge everybody in the council to support this motion.
Thank you. We now move to the vote. Those in favour, please show.
Chair.
52. Those against? 52 for, 4 abstentions. The motion is passed. We now move on to item 5, the pay policy, and I ask Councillor Pickard to move the report.
Thank you, Chair. As in previous years, Councillors asked to consider the pay policy statement. Members will remember that it is a legal requirement that the authority publish a pay policy statement by the 1st of April each year, setting out its own policies in relation to the pay of its workforce, particularly the senior staff and its lowest paid employees. We recognise the authority's responsibility to its employees and understands the importance of openness and transparency in setting pay and grading. We aim to have a clear written policies that ensure decisions on pay are fair, consistent and equitable across the workforce. The pay policy statement attached to the report pulls together what already exists within the authority and how it applies in relation to the statutory requirements of the Localism Act 2011. Some key areas of change that the Council may wish to note are the fact that salaries will increase from the 1st of April 2019 in line with the 2-year National Pay Award Agreement effective from the 1st of April 2018 through to the 31st of March 2020. A new pay model has been designed and consulted on to ensure that the Council's pay and grading structure for Green Book employees reflects the changes to the National Pay Spine Agreement as part of the 2019 Pay Award. The median average salary has changed from $21,962 to $22,401 per annum, but this has not changed the pay multiple, which continues to represent a ratio of 1 to 7. However, this is below both the government's expectation of a maximum of 1 to 20 and the public sector average of 15 to 1. However, it's worth noting that when you hear criticism of local authority pay levels, that the ratio in the private sector is 232 to 1. Ours is 7 to 1, theirs is 232 to 1, the difference between the top and the bottom. But also it's quite pleasing that the North Tyneside Living Wage Pay Supplement was implemented on the 1st of September 2018, which sets the minimum hourly rate at £8.75 per hour for those employees on spinal column points 6 to 11. On the implementation of the second year of the pay award, as from 1st of April this year, the lowest hourly rate will become £9 an hour, which is in line with the Living Wage Foundation recommendation, not the government recommendation. The pay policy statement also includes statements on job evaluation, pay and grading structures, and policies and terms and conditions in relating to the remuneration and payment of chief officers. Decisions that the authority has already made in terms of its pay and grading structures are included in the statement, as well as decisions on job evaluation and pay that have been introduced through the collective bargaining process. I ask Council to approve the recommendations in the report.
Thank you. I understand Councillor Carol Burtis is seconding this.
I second it and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wants to speak on the motion? No? Then, do you want to exercise your right to reply? Aye. Well, I was hoping you would point that out to us. Yeah, aye. Because you usually pick on me. We now move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous, so that's approved. I think we now move on to we now move the common seal, please. And we now move on to the chairman's announcements, right? Which, seeing as the meeting is so short, I've only got 10 pages, right? I'm only joking. I would like to first of all mention something that was in the Evening Chronicle today, and the Mayor and the Deputy Chair actually attended the inauguration of one of these pieces of equipment, and this is around the static defibrillators. And I'd just like to mention this. It came about following the death of the lady's son at the age of 24. Corley Hunter and his stepfather, Billy Irons, have turned their grief into the benefit of residents and visitors to the area of North Shields, where they live, and indeed he lived. And in turn have created, in one sense, a legacy to their son, with the installation, first of all, raising the funds, and the installation of static defibrillators at Caruso's, Riley's Fish Shack, the YMCA Nursery, the Fish Quay, and the Royal Keys Marina. The reason that I raise this is because, as you know, I was into defibrillators for schools, but I think as members I would like you to join me in commending the action of this family at such a grieving time. I think it's something that I couldn't have done, and I would like to commend them, because I think there's a lot of us in here who couldn't have done it either, to raise money for these sort of pieces of equipment. So I think we would like to, on your behalf, recognise their support, and we'll be sending a letter from the council doing so, on behalf of myself and the Mayor. The next item, which is, again, in one sense, a bit sad. There are 5 members of the council not seeking re-election. They are Councillors Brooks, Waggett, Fairley, Hodgson, Spillard and Mason. Now, regardless of their politics, I think we should thank them for their service to North Tyneside, and I also offer them the opportunity of a very brief speech. So if you would like to indicate, if you want to say anything, Councillor Spillard.
Thank you, Chair. When I became a councillor in 2010, I really had no idea what I was letting myself in for. I didn't come from a council world. But what I soon understand was that from the minute we drew our first breath until the time we take our last breath, the council wraps around the people of North Tyneside and provides services. So I want to thank all of the staff of North Tyneside for everything they do every day for our people. I've rang people at 9:30 on a Friday night, and they're not on duty, but they answer the phone. I've done it on Christmas Eve when it was a Saturday, and they answer the phone because there's something so important, it needs to be done. and they go above and beyond every day from the top to the bottom. There's too many people to name them all, but each and every one's important. But I would like to thank one of them in particular, and that's Paul Hanson, our Chief Exec. At the time I entered the council, he was head of service. And the first thing he did with new councillors at that time, and probably still does, is he invited them in to his office to explain what he did, what his service did, who his people were, and how we could get in touch with them and understand our way around the council. And that was so important to me as a new councillor who really didn't have a clue. And so I'm glad to see him where he is now, and I thank him for that. And I'm sure there's a few other people in here who feel the same. I also want to thank the residents of North Tyneside who enabled me to do this job for the last 9 years. It's been a great privilege. And I have very mixed feelings today. I feel quite emotional, although I didn't think I would, but I do. And of course, I want to thank all of my colleagues in this room, because all of us do it, because we feel it's important and we care about people. And I'm referring to everyone in this room, not just my own party. We may have differences, but I believe we're doing it for the right reasons. So thank you. I wish you great luck in the future, and I know you will do everything for the people of North Tyneside to ensure, whatever the circumstances that we face, every penny spent to make it the best it can be for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spillane. Is there anyone else? Councillor Hodgson.
I hope it won't be too long, Chairman.
Please stick to the point.
Chairman, I was first elected in May 2000, 19 years ago. Goodness knows where 19 years have gone, but anyway. And joined the council, which was in some disarray then. The 2000-2001 budget was overspent by a large amount and services were poor. The council leader at the time called on Cabinet leads to account for their results to council. And I recall one where the lead member said that she was proud to have overspent her budget by £2 million because she was doing good work. And I think Councillor Glinder would not want to hear that sort of thing again. The happiest occasion I witnessed was when Sarah Hunter was awarded the Freedom of the Borough. Sarah is a local girl and has become one of the best rugby players in the world. What a triumph. I loved it. So did her mother. I think Jeanette was over the moon. The most memorable speech in the chamber for me was made by Councillor Conway, and many people here perhaps won't remember him or won't have known him. We were debating the commemoration of the Holocaust, and he told us that as a soldier, he and his group had been sent to investigate one of the death camps at the end of the war. And the group knew they were near the site because of the stink. Now, I had never associated the sense of smell with the Holocaust before. It only added to the horror of the Holocaust for me. The most amusing occasion, on one occasion I remember Councillor Brett. Now, some of you may not remember Councillor Brett, but he was very well thought of councillor, very intelligent man, tremendous amount of knowledge. Councillor Brett gave us an amazing display of legal expertise when, after about an hour of forensic analysis of a report before council, he concluded by proposing exactly where we'd started out. My good friend Ken Mewett, again a member on this side then, and I debated whether we should take the injection now or later on. The biggest mistake, all organisations make mistakes, and this is no exception, but it's a great disappointment for me that when we decided to invest in something called LATS permits. These were permits that enabled a council to bury more waste in the ground than the government thought desirable. They were permits to pollute. I hated them. We purchased £2 million worth of them against my wishes and found we did not need them in the end. Worst of all, we purchased them from the Westminster Council, the richest council in the country, where we were one of the poorest. That was a sad occasion. Chairman, we have many issues for the future. In fact, I think they will all get more difficult than they are at the moment. Certainly the environment with carbon reduction, air quality particulates and oxides of nitrogen and others yet to be identified, and plastics too, would all require much attention in the future. Chairman, I thank my party for the opportunity to represent them here, and I thank members and staff, past and present, for their courtesy and professionalism. And I wish the Council the best in the future. And as Tony Blair said, that's it, the end.
Councillor Waggett-Fairley.
As people on this side will know, I'm a woman of few words.
You do have a short speech, I hope.
And I will make it short and sweet. Councillor Spillard has said it all. I'd just like to thank all the officers and everybody within the chamber for supporting me, advice and support which has been very sage and very good throughout the last few years. And I'll keep it short and sweet and say thank you very much and goodbye.
I would now like to mention, and Ed has already stole part of my little thing here, I would like to mention and send our congratulations to Sarah Hunter through her mother, Councillor Janet Hunter, who led the England women's rugby team to the Six Nations Trophy at the weekend with an absolutely unbelievable score against our enemy from over the border, Scotland. I think that really made my day, to be perfectly honest. So, congratulations. I now move on to...
Just because it's Councillor Hodgson's last meeting, can I let him go with a smile by saying that because of the good work of myself, Frank and Wendy, Port of Tyne have withdrawn their plans for the incinerator site in Willington Quay.
Yes, I'm sure that's made his day. Right. Can I now mention one or two other things that are in the near future in the pipeline, and these are to do with my charity. As you know, I'm a great one for trying to raise money for things. We have a thing called Pie, Pea and Prosecco in the park. This is at Northumberland Park. There's tickets on sale. Roughly 35% of the tickets are now sold. So if people want to actually go, they need to get their order in fast. What you get is you get obviously pie, pea, prosecco, but there's also beer as well, and there's entertainment. And to be honest, if you haven't been to Northumberland Park, it's actually quite an interesting park since it's been refurbished, and is one of our premier parks across the borough. And I think an event like this just showcases the park, as it were. We also have the Grand Raffle Big Draw at the end of the civic year, and up till now we have over 40 prizes, which range from, believe it or not, a coloured television to a set of tyres, a hedge trimmer to copious amounts of alcohol, to vouchers for shopping, and also vouchers for food outlets. So I would recommend the tickets. Obviously, I would recommend the tickets. You'll obviously get tickets in your mail. What I would ask people to do is, if they don't want the tickets and if they can't sell the tickets, could they please return the tickets, because we actually have to account for the ones that aren't sold. And it's quite difficult when we ring somebody up and they'll say, yeah, just chuck them in a bin. The last thing on my little agenda is, again, linked to my charity. I would like to thank the new head of Democratic Services and his staff, who this week had a baking session and proceeded to sell the pieces of cake and raised over £60. That's certainly never happened in the past, so I think that is absolutely wonderful, and I thank him for that and his staff. And at that, I now pass over to the elected mayor, who is probably going to talk quite sane instead of like me.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've been a bit modest when you're talking about defibrillators, because I know how much you'd raise to ensure that every school has one. And I think we all should thank you for that effort as well, to be quite honest. Well done. However, as we approach the end of the municipal year, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our retiring councillors for all their hard work over the years, and I wish you all well. It has been, of course, another challenging 12 months, particularly in the light of the efficiency savings we've had to achieve. However, despite these challenges, we have continued to demonstrate our ambitions for our residents in Borough. Finally, I would like to offer a huge thanks to all our officers, and to the officers who are here present today. Would you pass on my thanks to all your staff? I think they give us excellent service, and of course we rely on them every day to deliver services to our residents. And of course they have helped immensely to make our ambitious plans, a vision for North Tyneside, to become a reality, to be quite honest, so thank you very much. I do hope that you will all continue to support our plans in the year ahead. And all I'm saying to have a nice time on the election trail. Thank you very much indeed.
We now move on to questions from members, and the first question is from Councillor Brockbank. Would you like to read the question or take it as read?
I'll read it, please. Would the Mayor look again at the authority's local plan and follow the example of Northumberland County Council's Conservative group and re-examine the proposals?
I think Councillor Pickard's answering this on behalf.
Thank you, Chair. The answer is no. North Tyneside is in a very different position to Northumberland. We have a local plan that has been agreed by full council and, of course, your own Conservative government. North Tyneside local plan was adopted by this council in July 2017, and this followed extensive public arrangements, rigorous reviews and improvements during its presentation stages, and an independent examination by a planning inspector appointed by the Conservative Secretary of State. Production of the local plan wasn't a local decision. This is a legislative requirement to have a development plan in place. Local planning authorities who do not have one or have an up-to-date plan in place can be subject to Conservative government intervention. The situation in Northumberland County Council was an emerging core strategy which had reached submission draft stage and had been submitted for examination but was withdrawn by the Council prior to its examination. I am also aware that in March 2018, the Conservative Secretary of State wrote to Northumberland County Council to express concern at the lack of progress on making the plan and warning that intervention may follow. Some quotes from that letter are, "I am writing today as a result of the Council's persistent failure over many years and under different administrations to get a local plan in place." Some perhaps at national level is the same thing. They can't seem to get plans in place and get them agreed. I know that your Council has made some progress since my letter of the 16th of November, but I remain concerned that the draft Northumberland local plan will not be published for consultation until winter 2018, and we know it's out of consultation now, and then following examination will not be adopted until summer 2020. I will continue to monitor your progress closely, and any further significant delays will cause me to have considerable doubt as to whether your Council is doing everything that is necessary in connection with the preparation of a local plan. Don't forget, this is a Conservative minister who finishes off saying, "I will not hesitate to consider how to use the full range of powers Parliament has given me to ensure a plan is in place." Not having a plan, and that was the quotes from the letters, not having a plan not only risks government intervention, it also means developers can submit planning applications at will without any strategic context, and in my opinion, in the present housing building climate, it would be foolhardy for a local authority not to have an adopted development strategy, which is exactly what the local plan is. By having an up-to-date adopted plan approved by this council, this has removed the risk of being disadvantaged by speculative and unplanned development proposals, as was the case when a number of proposals which were not supported by the council were allowed on appeal during 2011 to 2015. It is naive in the extreme to think we can just state that we are going to review the plan and that will bring a halt to the whole process. In fact, the existing local plan would remain in place until a new plan is adopted. Any new plan would be required to increase our average annual housing requirement, and we would be required to identify more land in a new local plan for housing development. If I cannot explain, you have to understand that in terms of housing requirements, the current local plan establishes that the borough must plan for an overall average of 790 dwellings per annum between 2011 and 2032. If the authority were to review its local plan at this time, it would be required to follow the Conservative government's new policy on meeting housing needs and apply the Conservative government's estimate. For 2019, that estimate identifies that North Tyneside would be required to plan for an annual requirement of 817 homes per year. This is 27 more homes per year than our current plan, so if the new plan started immediately, you would need to identify land to accommodate an additional 378 houses compared to our plan. However, the naivety gets worse. Any local plan is also required to plan for a period of at least 15 years from adoption. So if adoption of a new plan were achieved by, say, 2021, given the timescale I told you about Northumberland, if we adopted a new plan were achieved, this would mean we would need to plan for an extra 4 years of growth. That is beyond the local plan period we have at the minute of 2032 up to the year 2036. This would mean identifying how an additional 3,268 houses could be delivered by way of additional site allocations for the extra 4 years alone. A grand total of 3,595 houses over the total time of the new plan. It may be okay in Northumberland with an area of 5,013 square kilometres, of which 97% is classed as rural and is sparsely populated, compared to our area at 82 square kilometres, which is less than 2% of that area of Northumberland. Therefore, by suggesting that we look at alternative proposals, Councillor Brockbanks will have to tell us where those additional replacement sites would be. However, if we go by his published statements in the press recently to oppose all building on the Merton Gap site, he'd be required to find sites, additional sites for that extra 3,000, making a grand total of 6,592 additional housing sites that would have to be found in North Tyneside. I believe that by his misunderstanding of the position, he's in danger of misleading the public, and he should either identify the sites for the additional 6,592 houses or admit he's only raising this as an unachievable demand designed entirely for political purposes.
Councillor Brockbank, do you have a supplement?
I do, yeah. Thank you very much for that answer. But given the wide-ranging consultation, and I think the Cabinet member has misunderstood the purpose of the question by his response, given the wide-ranging consultation engaged with by Northumberland County Council, which led to a radically different set of proposals from Labour's core strategy, can the Mayor recognise that the residents of Monkseaton South are rightly angered that they feel that another local authority has had the opportunity to reconsult on an unpopular plan, and in North Tyneside that is just not the case?
Once again, I think, listen, your question said reconsider our plan. Our plan has been agreed by your government. To reconsider the plan has to start the whole consultation, yes, again, but has to be under the new higher figures. You cannot start the consultation on a basis of lower figures. You just can't do it. And that's why I say your misunderstanding is putting forward a demand that cannot be met, and you know that. And therefore, you to say that we can open it up again and reduce the numbers is just false. and that cannot be done under the instructions of your own Conservative government.
Councillor Lott, do you want to...
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I'll read the question. But firstly, did you get that set of tyres from the back of Fraser Terrace where we had them fly-tipped 2 days ago?
No, these are brand new.
My question is, following nearly 3 years of construction works and many years of campaigning by North East councils before that, the A19 A1058 Coast Road Junction, which has seen 1,800 people employed and who have collectively worked 1 million hours, is approaching completion. Would the Mayor join with me in congratulating Highways England, their main contractors, the Sisk-Lagan joint venture, and the numerous subcontractors who have all played their part in delivering one of the largest civil engineering projects ever seen in this borough, the A19 Coast Road Silverlink Underpass, on time and in budget. Moreover, they are to be congratulated on the way in which they have engaged with the communities of North Tyneside and the wider region, and thanked for their contributions to numerous charities.
Councillor Johnson, I understand you're answering this.
I am, thanks, Chair. I'm absolutely happy to join Council Lott congratulating Highways England, Sisk-Lagan, the main contractor, and every other subcontractor that's worked on site for their excellent work on this important project. The Silverlink Junction has been a congestion hotspot for many years, so it's very pleasing to see the improvement work nearing completion. The new junction will greatly assist the travelling public and will also improve access to nearby business parks. The scheme, however, is complemented by numerous other major highways projects Council successfully delivered across the borough over the last 5 years. North Tyneside, with Highways England money and our Council's cash investment, has seen about £150 million worth of investment in our highway network. However, we have all felt the impacts of disruption this level of investment brings. And I think we should thank everybody for their patience right across the borough during the works that have gone on. These works will see significant improvement to transport journeys in North Tyneside and roads right across the borough. Works that we've already completed are already seeing the improvements. One works that we've completed is not seeing the level of improvements that it will once a neighbour authority completes their road works. But traffic flows, once this happens, will improve right across the borough. In relation to the construction of the Silverlink scheme, I've been very impressed. In particular, how Highways England's team have carried out its community engagement. They've been to schools, offered career advice to schools, engaged with local residents consistently, donated to local projects, been fantastic engaging with the local community. They've also been very environmentally friendly. Councillor Hodgson will be delighted to know these last meeting as well. They've won awards, and they've recycled more road, ground, and every other product than any other highway scheme currently in the United Kingdom. All of the earth unearthed at Silverlink will be used at Tesco's on the overpass. Benton Quarry, which Councillor Jared Hunter was involved in, received all of the old road surface that's been dug up. And numerous other charities and organisations around North Tyneside have benefited from donations from the scheme. So it's been fantastic for the environment. Normally they would all go to landfill, instead it's being used, which totals about 80,000 cubic tonnes of produce that's not went to landfill, that has went to the local projects around the North East, which is fantastic. So yes, absolutely, we'll thank Council Lott, join Council Lott in thanking Highways England, and I'm sure we're all fully looking forward to the junction being fully operational next month and the huge benefits it will bring for North Tyneside.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Lott?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, we now move on to question 3. Councillor Drummond, do you want it to be taken as read or read it out?
Can I read it out, please, Chair?
No problem.
Thank you. Labour councillors in Muncie and South have worked with council officers, Northumbrian Water, local communities for many years to help deliver flood alleviation scheme across the ward to reduce flood risk, as highlighted in the News Guardian February 19th, 2019. That was caused by extreme weather such as Thunder Thursday on the 20th of June 2012. With the elected Mayor passing our thanks to officers for completion of this essential work and reassure residents that this council will continue to work with them on such projects. We'll continue to work with them on such issues proactively and quash the rumour mill, scaremonger and half-truths the opposition and the associated groups have spread about flood risk being increased by housing without taking professional advice from responsible authorities, including Northumbrian Water and Environment Agency.
Councillor Carol Burdis, I understand you're answering this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to join Councillor Drummond and his colleagues and the elected Mayor in thanking officers for successfully delivering another important flood mitigation scheme. A scheme that reduces the risk of flooding for hundreds of homes in Monkston South and the wider borough. We all know the devastating effect that Thunder Thursday had on our communities back in June 2012, and I'm proud of how we have responded. Firstly, by identifying all of the affected areas and prioritising the flood mitigation schemes appropriate to the risk. This Monkston South scheme is one of the many across the whole of the borough, which has seen us, along with the partner agencies, invest over £15 million over the last 5 years, reducing the risk of flooding to many hundreds of homes in all 4 quarters of the borough. We will, of course, continue to work with our partner agencies such as Northumbrian Water and the Environment Agency through our North Tyneside Surface Water and Drainage Partnership to proactively tackle flooding risks across the borough. In fact, now there is a £6 million flood mitigation scheme is on site in the Killingworth area. Killingworth Lake currently drains into the public sewer system, which overloads during storms and can cause flooding. The scheme involves removing the surface water by diverting the lake through a new culvert to an open water course at Westmoor. The scheme also involves the creation of a large dry storage area on the south side of the lake. This will fill up during times of major storms, then slowly drain back into the lake once the storm has passed. All of these works will dramatically reduce the risk of flooding to homes and infrastructure. In Briarvale, our £800,000 scheme has just been completed to reduce the risk of flooding to houses in the Briarvale area. The works in this area involved building a large dry storage basin next to the properties and a new sewer to connect it to the culvert on Rake Lane. The basin intercepts runoff from the fields in Merton and sends it to Marden Quarry via the new sewer we've installed. The water previously hits the Briarvale area, causing flooding. On Beach Road, Northumbrian Water has recently started a major scheme to reduce the risk of flooding to properties in Preston Village and Preston Grange. The work involves installing shallow basins in the wide grass verge at Beach Road, which will again intercept and hold back water during storms. Developers are required to undertake detailed flood risk assessment for all new housing developments and evidence that any new housing will not increase the likelihood of flooding in the area. The Council is fully committed to working with the developers and drainage partners at the planning stage will ensure that the flood risk is kept to an absolute minimum and certainly no higher than the Greenfield equivalent. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Drummond, do you have a supplementary question?
I don't, Chair, thank you.
Sorry. We now move on to Councillor Lee. Do you want to take your question as read or do you want to read it out?
I'll read it, thank you, Chair. With graduate debt running at £50,000 upwards, there has been a growing concern about the cost of ongoing university and an awakening, a realisation that this spend does not represent good value for money. Fees in the UK are now among the highest in the world, and students question if there will be a return on such a huge investment in terms of future graduate opportunities and earnings. Would you agree with me that every child deserves the right to education, and this should not depend upon your ability to pay for private education, student fees or tuition, but that free education is our children's right? Would you also agree with me that the current government education policy is destroying our children's future?
Councillor Early, I understand you're answering this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I would absolutely agree that all young people deserve the right to a free, well-funded, good quality education, and that this should not depend on the ability to pay for either private education, tuition or other student fees. As elected members, we should all be passionate about our local education system, and despite the cuts imposed on us by central government, we are doing everything we can in North Tyneside to support our schools, to help our children develop to reach their full potential, and to prepare them so that they can lead fulfilling lives after leaving school and enjoy access to good employment and career opportunities. Whilst there is always more work to be done, in particular to ensure that our young people leave school with the best possible exam grades, I am proud to say that we continue to be one of the highest performing authorities in the region in terms of our educational standards. For the academic year 2017-18, out of a cohort of nearly 2,000 Year 11 pupils, some 98% went into further education, employment or training, and of those, 97% continued to participate in learning in some form. That figure includes those young people who took up apprenticeships, which North Tyneside continues to support, and which increasingly provide a valuable alternative career route to that of higher education. At 1.9%, which equates to 37 of our young people, North Tyneside continues to have the lowest NEET rate in the region. However, maintaining this level of performance continues to be a real challenge for our schools, with significant real terms reduction in the funding that we have seen. Members will, I am sure, have seen recent stories from around the country about head teachers having to go into their schools during holidays to clean because the budget reductions have forced them to cut cleaning costs. There are other equally shocking stories of schools closing early in order to save on running costs. I also understand that recently a school in the Prime Minister's own constituency asked parents for donations of essential items, including blue tack, sellotape, stationery and even toilet paper. However, concerns about primary and secondary school funding of our education system extend beyond into further education. As the questioner points out, students in higher education on completion of their studies in England now, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, have average graduate debts in the region of £50,000. More worryingly, those from lower income families leave higher education with the highest debts, so that even if they go into high earning jobs after graduating, they may be still be worse off than their counterparts from higher income backgrounds. As the Shadow Minister for Higher Education has said, the government must decide if they believe a lifetime of debt and a tax on aspiration are the best way to fund our higher education system. My view is that we need to move back towards a publicly funded higher education system and at the very least restore maintenance grants to help students from low-income households meet their living costs. Here in North Tyneside, we will continue to work with our schools to minimise the impact of this government's policy and funding decisions, and to ensure that we offer a wide range of further education, apprenticeships and employment opportunities for all our young people, regardless of their ability to pay. In conclusion, I agree that all children and young people deserve the right to a good education, and one which is not dependent upon their ability to pay for private education, tuition fees or service student loans. Given recent reports that several universities are on the verge of bankruptcy, current government policy is not only saddling many of our young people with the prospect of crippling lifelong debt, but also risks the very future of our higher education system itself. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Chair.
Next question is from Councillor McMeegan. Do you want to read the question or take it as read?
If I may, Chair, I'll read it out. Thank you. In spite of the very clear presentations and additional briefing notes being circulated to all elected members confirming the position on financial reserves, a number of opposition candidates are misrepresenting North Tyneside's Council's financial position to its residents with regard to the true level of financial reserves held and the ability to use them to balance our general revenue budget. For the avoidance of any further doubt, will the Mayor agree to undertake the following? Firstly, make a further statement to this Chamber confirming the true level of reserves and issue an unequivocal press release through all available channels confirming the same. Secondly, where clear evidence of misrepresentation of this information is brought to her attention, will she request a written explanation from the relevant group leader as to why this has been allowed to happen. The Mayor has requested to also reserve the right to name any candidates in any press releases who are found to be guilty of such misrepresentations. Thirdly, confirm that she will report any members of this chamber, present or future, who mislead residents on this important matter to the Standards Committee for further investigation.
Councillor Glindon, I understand you're answering this.
I am, Chair, thank you very much. I'm glad to have this opportunity to clarify again, and I repeat again, the position on our reserves and balances, as I'm aware of a number of misrepresentations done either by mistake or by design, excuse me, that may be misleading members of the public. The true situation is, reserves and balances as at the 31st of March 2018, in terms of our reserves, including the statement of accounts at the end of 17-18, was a figure of £100,395,000 in reserves. Of those, 13.457 million related to the capital and cannot be used for revenue purposes. Also included in this was 28.903 million relating to the housing revenue account, which cannot, obviously, absolutely cannot be used in the general fund. This left over just £58 million in general fund reserves and balances. This is made up of 3.356 million in school balances, which cannot be used in the general fund. £6.084 million general fund balances. This is needed as a cushion against unforeseen events. 2.765 million grant reserves that have to be spent on specific things or paid back to the relevant grant funders. 26.617 million, which are ring-fence reserves for the likes of PFI contracts, which you have to manage the cash we get from central government over the lifetime of the agreement. This left 18.429 million reserves in respect of the general fund. Of this, 4.019 million was a change reserve. The change reserve, which everybody will know because it was just being spoken about in the last budget setting, is there to support the authority through change and is to support change projects over the next 4 years. The final balance of 14.404 million is a strategic reserve. This amount is judged by our Section 151 officer as required in law to be available to the authority to manage risk. The risks we know of, which are relevant to this figure, are regularly considered by Cabinet. So it's the £4 million change reserve and the £14 million strategic reserve, a one-off total of £18 million in context to £120 million of government cuts. We're an organisation that has a turnover of almost £500 million. So I'm happy to provide my answers in writing and again break down for our reserves and balances to all members. I believe it has been issued before, but we'll do it again. In terms of the rest of the Councillor's questions, as elected members, we all have a responsibility to act in line with the principles of public life. Established by the Nolan Committee and Standards Public Life, this is incorporated in North Tyneside's Code of Conduct for elected members. And I'm sure all members are familiar with the standards of the Code. Should any member have evidence of the Code of Conduct is breached, I'm equally sure they would raise this matter through the appropriate channels. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have a supplementary question?
No, Chair, but I would like to thank and commend Councillor Glindon for the clear and concise manner in which he's addressed the very pertinent concerns that were raised in this question.
Well, I can see he's very pleased about that. Just before I forget, I'm going to take a bit of a liberty here. I forgot something in my little speech, and I think it's quite important, given that this is well, it is my last actual council meeting, other than the annual general meeting as chair. And I would just like to mention something that Councillor Early and I carried out just recently when we went to visit St Bernadette's School. And Councillor Early was talking about the Constitution and so on and so forth, and I was there to present some certificates. So we took along some pin badges with us, and we dished these pin badges out. And we got this lovely email from Councillor Phillips, and we thought, by gum, he's on the ball, he knows what's going on in his ward, until we looked at the end of it and it said, my daughter got a pin badge and she now thinks she's got a pin badge like her dad. And I think that is absolutely great. Thank you very much and have a safe journey home.